Hi, I'm JFA Promotes from SWATRClassGuides.net. Today I'm going to take you through a leveling build that's balanced between healing and DPS for the Jedi Sage. In case you haven't found him yet, we'll start by heading south on the Republic Fleet main deck, and then just a little bit west before we get to the elevator to find the skill reset trainer. I wanted to do a video so that I could show where the points go as I level up instead of where they end up. Some skills affect abilities you might not have until later, and some skills are far better to have at lower levels. So we're going to focus on that as we go through the trees. So we begin looking at the healing tree. The first skill in there is a good example of that. Immutable Force will reduce your activation on Deliverance by 0.3 seconds and more for the next point. The problem is you don't get Deliverance until level 12, so we've got 3 points to spend before that becomes a useful skill. Penetrating Light increases your Force critical by 1%. As a Sage, everything you do is Force-based, which is great, so we'll keep that one in mind. Wisdom increases total presence by 3% and all healing done by 1%. If you find you're doing healing quite a bit at this level, if you're getting into PvP, that can help, but the thing is, presence is only useful when you're soloing with your companion in PvE, so depends on how much you do that. Again, we'll keep it in mind. Moving to the telekinetics tree, inner strength reduces force costs across everything, mental longevity increases your total force. Thing is, as you just became a sage, you just went from 100 force to 500 force. You're not running out of force at this point. You won't be for most of your teens, so we're not going to put points into that yet. Clamoring Force increases damage on a bunch of abilities by 2%. The only one you have that really soon is Disturbance, and that's really only good if you're really trying to conserve force, and again, we're not having problems with force at this point. Moving to the balance tree, the other DPS tree, we have Empowered Throw, increases damage dealt by telekinetic throw by 4%. You use telekinetic throw more than you use Disturbance, and it's a bigger buff. Jedi Resistance reduces all your damage taken by 1%. At this point, you're stuck with light armor for the whole game, and you don't even have your force armor ability yet. So a damage reduction, even if a small one, is pretty tempting. Will of the Jedi increases total willpower by 3%. Everything you do as a sage is driven by willpower, so a 3% buff to that is pretty attractive. When you compare it to the presence buff of 3%, you have to wonder, how often am I using my companion, and is the extra 1% healing worth that damage? Probably not. Balance is the most attractive tree. I find Jedi Resistance and Will of the Jedi are the most attractive skills in there because they apply to everything, not just one ability. So we can put 3 points in there, however you'd like, for those first few levels until you get Deliverance. Now, if you want to keep it balanced, you might, or if you notice that when you're casting Deliverance, you're getting the pulp beat out of you and you'd like to get it off faster, using Immutable Force will speed that right up. So we'll put a couple points and max that out. Now, depending on if you feel more like healing or if you feel more like doing damage, what I did at this point is I went back to the balance tree and I put in 2 more points to go up 1 tier, because then I get to the second tier, which has Pinning Resolve. In PvP, Force Stun's super useful, and you're going to get a reduced cooldown on it with Pinning Resolve. In PvE, it turns your Force Lift into an area of effect, which will pick up an extra target for each point you put into it. It totally changes how solo PvE goes, and you become a real crowd control generator in group PvE. So we're going to put 2 points into that, unless we feel like at some point we're having problems healing, like we can't keep our companion alive, or we can't keep our group alive. If that's the case, and let's assume it is because we're 2 points here versus 5 on our DPS tree, we can put the points either into Wisdom if we're doing a lot of solo stuff, or Penetrating Light if we do more PvP and group, because then it's across the board. That gets us to the next tree, but for now, we'll go back, put our 2 points in Pinning Resolve. We'll take another look around these Tier 2 skills in both of the trees that we're using. Upheaval is a 15% chance for a 50% damage buff on Project. That works out to 7.5 damage buff on Project. Project's a useful skill. It does use more force for the damage it does than Telekinetic Throw will. Because we just got into the 20s, we're seeing some more difficult fights and might last longer in PvP. I don't recommend going for things that are going to make us use Project more, because it's possible we're starting to run out of force from time to time. So, Focused Insight, not very useful because it's a small heal that ticks sometimes when you're a certain type of ability. Criticals, so for a Sage who can heal themselves, it's probably not that useful. I think it's aimed at the Shadow because this is the shared tree out of the Consular. Critical Kinesis increases crit chance of Telekinetic Throw and Disturbance by 5%. Now, that's useful sounding. Let's just compare it to the healing tree, though. Foresight reduces the pushback whenever you're activating a healing ability. I find it really useful. It also lowers threat generated when you're healing. That's great because a lot of your tougher fights, you'll have ads that'll come up. They won't get picked up by the tanks necessarily, so it's quite a useful skill. Pain Bearer increases all healing received by 4%. Ideally, you're not healing yourself. In PvP, if you're getting attacked, you kind of want to get out of there more than stand and heal yourself. In PvE, you ideally have a tank or a companion that's soaking that up for you. Psychic Suffusion increases your damage and healing on area of effect by 5%. You only have one area of effect at this point, Force Wave. It's got a long cooldown and you only use it when you're surrounded, so not too excited about that one. Let's assume that we're having trouble getting our heals casted, and Foresight is our most attractive option, and we'll put 3 points into that. Now the other attractive skills were back in the balance tree, so let's look at buffing out our Telekinetic Throw with Critical Kinesis and Empowered Throw. So now we have a super Telekinetic Throw, and we've opened up the third tier of the balance tree, which opens up Force and Balance, which is an immensely useful skill. Your first AoE, if you've used this build, and you'll find yourself using it quite often now that you have it. And now that you have an AoE, Psychic Suffusion becomes more appealing, and that opens up the third tier of the healing tree. We have access to Rejuvenate, another immensely useful skill. It's your first instant activation healing ability. It's the only one you can fire on the run, no less. So we're totally balanced on the DPS healing front with 11 points in each of the trees that we've been using, and the special ability at the third tier of each one. Let's look at where we'll put points from here. Rejuvenate opens up Conveyance, which has a chance of activating when you use Rejuvenate. Once you've got Conveyance, it'll buff your next healing skill that you use. The problem is, Deliverance is really the only one of those skills that you're using at this point, because you don't have Healing Trance or Salvation until you get further up the tree, and Benevolence really isn't that useful compared to Deliverance. Valiance is only so useful because I don't find that I use Noble Sacrifice very much. Usually when I'm running out of force, there's also a health issue or threat, and I don't want to make the trade and take the regeneration hit. Force Armor is useful because we are having force issues, and we use it a lot, so reducing the cost is attractive. Let's keep it in mind. Moving to our balance tree. Psychic Barrier will reduce the pushback on Mind Crush and Telekinetic Throw by 25%. Those are both really useful skills. Also, it gives you 1/3 chance per point. Once you've got 3 points, 100% chance of getting 1% of your force back every time you do damage with Telekinetic Throw. You figure that Telekinetic Throw keeps ticking and you stand there channeling it and doing damage. That's a pretty attractive skill. And Telekinetic Balance makes Telekinetic Throw have a 0-second cooldown, so that's pretty tempting as well. Tempting skills in both trees, but I kind of feel like Conveyance is delayed gratification in the sense that the buffs apply to abilities you get later on in the tree. For that reason, I'd rather be putting points into the Balance tree as I level up instead of the Healing tree. What I'll do later is I can respec and get Conveyance while I'm getting the more advanced skills. That's how the Balance build looks at level 35. Let me know what you think in the comments here or at swatarclassguides.net. Thanks a lot for watching.